So great to have my good friend and one of the best mortgage brokers in the city, Adam Cote from Referral Mortgages. Welcome, Adam.
It's good to be back, Paul. It's been a while since we've done one of these.
It has. And listen, the reason I wanted to get you on today is we've seen over the last 12 months, 18 months, we've seen crazy changes. I know the last time we spoke, rates were really low, prices were going through the roof. So what I want to do today is just get sort of an idea of where we've been, where we are now, where you expect us to go, what rates are going to do, what's the mortgage industry as well as the real estate industry. Where do you see that going, Adam?
Right, so that's a pretty loaded question because I think we've seen a big shift in the last 12 months. I think the last time we spoke, actually, interest rates were maybe a little bit lower than they were right now at the end of the fall last year. Since then, they've obviously gone up, but in between, we had a little bit of a pocket last spring where the interest rates kind of climbed back down into the mid fours to high 4% range, and we saw a flurry of activity in the market. Right, we started to see the price average cost of home go up in Ottawa. We started to see a little bit of bidding wars again and all that left, which we thought we were not going to see this for the longest time now, right? So, and the reason that kind of happened was the Bank of Canada had kind of paused hikes, last January up until kind of early summer. And the reason they paused hikes was inflation started to look like it was trending down and all of that. And they thought that they had hiked enough to do what they needed to do to kind of balance the economy and tame inflation. And then we started to see some bad activity happening from these rising interest rates in the States. So we had a couple of banks that were failing miserably and some issues there with those banks. And then basically what happened at that point was we started to see the rates come down. The bond market started to come down a little bit. So the fixed rates came back down into the fours and high 4%. And we started to see some more activity in the market because the big pain point, we discussed this last time, the big pain point for people buying right now, it's not that there's a lack of buyers, it's that it's incredibly tough to qualify with these interest rates. What people tend to forget is they have this phenomenon called the mortgage stress test. And with the mortgage stress test, we have to take the interest rate that you have right now, mind you, that are at 30-year highs, add 2% to that and stress test people on qualifying at rates in the 7, 8, 9%. Like it's crazy right now, right? We never thought we would ever see this. So ultimately, end of summer, what happened? Inflation's sticky. They always said it wasn't going to be a straight line back to their 2% target. That reared its ugly head. The Bank of Canada, did a couple more hikes, which sent bonds back the other way and sent fixed rates back even more elevated than they were temporarily last winter. So
we look at the rates where they are now, and excuse me, we look at some of the baby boomers who were paying 18, 19, 20% back in the day. So this must be a joke for them, but I think one of the biggest issues for us is that I don't think we've ever seen rates go up so quick, so many rate hikes. I think it just crippled the first-time homebuyer market, which pretty much cripples our market.
Yeah. Well, I think housing affordability, there definitely is a crisis in this country right now with that. And, that was caused by, multiple factors. One, high level of immigration, people coming in, all-time highs, million plus immigrants per year coming to the country. They need housing, whether that be rental or buying a house. And we're seeing the rental market kind of just go through the roof as well too. Like very unreasonable to rent a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom condo, and you're paying, in some instances downtown, you're paying almost $3,000 a month plus, right? Depending on the building and the amenities. So really unaffordable. At the end of the day though, people need a place to live, right now. And then again, I think that we're getting 2 calls basically on a weekly basis, I think at the brokerage level. And it's people are struggling right now, right? With these high interest rates, high cost of living because of inflation. And they want to know what they can do. And it's incredibly hard to qualify to refinance right now. So even if you did want to consolidate some unsecured debt, you've got to qualify to do that. And then when you do that, they're likely losing the lower interest rate that they had. So they're not necessarily always in a better position if we were to do that. And the second thing is we get people calling that are renting. Rental's been sold, or they just graduated from university, or they just came to Canada, and they would rather buy as opposed to renting. And $100,000 a year income in Ottawa right now with no debts, with a modest down payment, in some instances doesn't even get you into a townhouse.
Yeah.
And that's a bit problematic. So.
It is, and here's what I'm seeing in the industry, and obviously you too. I mean, you're dealing with all the applications. Excuse me. Is if we look back at where we've gone over the last year, with the rates going up so quick, the segment of the market, which is a large segment of our market, is our first-time home buyers. That's about 35% of our market. You couple that with investors, it's no longer makes sense to be an investor in this market. So now you're looking at close to 50, maybe even more than 50% of our market has taken themselves out of the market because of these rates.
Yeah.
So that's what we've seen in the past. We're now going into 2024, a little bit more optimistic. There's two trains of thoughts where we could go. We could just, the rates will remain the same. We could have a stagnant 2024, or rates could start to come down. First-time home buyers and investors might get back into the market. You know, at the end of 2024, there's the foreign buyer ban, which they could abolish, which now we have a lot of foreign buyers coming in. So we know where we've been, now where we are. Where do you see the market going forward? Where do you see rates going forward? You know, who's going to be priced out of this market or priced into this market now?
I think the number one conundrum when we're talking to people that are looking to get a mortgage or get pre-approved is they're trying to time the market. They're trying to say, you know, is it a good time to buy right now? Will prices go even lower? What is my mortgage payment going to look like and all that? And we've talked about this in the past. I'd rather pay $100,000 to $150,000 less for the house and take a 6% mortgage interest rate that you can renegotiate if you're smart about the term and product that you take. Because you can't, once you've paid $800,000 for the house, you can't go back and renegotiate the price, but you can always renegotiate the mortgage rate, right? So right now, the outlook, and most economists at the bank are predicting that there will be some sort of rate cuts, probably towards the latter half of next year. And ultimately, when that happens, the big question is how much, and that will be determined by two things: how bad the economy looks at that point, which, you know, GDP, basically, I would say when the numbers come out this fall, it's very likely we'll be in a technical recession. Whether or not GDP's at 0 point something percent, that's still barely any growth, right? Like, we're not going anywhere as an economy. And how fast it takes inflation to get back to that 2% target or close to that 2% target, right? And naturally, I say recession first, because if there is a recession, we'll likely get back there a lot sooner. The conundrum there is, again, if interest rates come back down into the fours, call it high threes, because I don't think part of the problem that happened here is the ultra low interest rates for a long time. I think were a mistake. They kept them too low for too long, and then this is why we're in this inflationary mess. I think the happy medium for the Bank of Canada is to keep interest rates somewhere in the threes, maybe low fours, because that's kind of their neutral range that they determine, where the rates are not stimulative nor prohibitive to the economy. So at some point, looking at the GDP, we're going to have to get rates back there. Now, when that happens with all the immigration and all the demand, what do you think is going to happen to home prices?
They're going to skyrocket.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and they could very easily get back to the level of where they were, you know, in spring 2022, before, you know, rates started going up, Bank of Canada started going up. And a question I ask you is, you know, in the greater Ottawa area, obviously there's different pockets and all that. What would you say home prices have gone down roughly percentage-wise?
We've gone down about 10 to 12%. We were at our prime in April of 2022. Our average sale price here in Ottawa was $739,000. Ended the year at $691. By the end of January, we're already down to $612, and we've made a rebound now. We're at $660. So I'd say we're still down about 10 to 12% in the Ottawa area. We will make up a little bit of ground, but I know there's some economists that are saying that we're going to be up 4% by the end of the year, 7% by the end of the year.
Yeah.
Not going to happen. Yeah. We haven't gone down our average sale price since 1996, and it went down, 1% and change. We're probably going to see our market down, could be upwards of 10, 12%, like we talked about. I think it's going to be a little lower, but we might end the year down about 8%. So let me ask you a question. I actually met with an investor this morning, and this lady was ready to gung-ho to invest in Ottawa real estate. And my advice to her was, I'm not sure if right now is the time. I'm telling people to get into the market now if you can stomach the rates for the next 6, 8, 12 months, when I believe they're going to start coming down. So it's really hard now to advise an investor, oh yeah, get in there. You're going to be way negative cash flow. But I do believe, like you think, it could be a perfect storm. We got 500,000 immigrants coming to Canada every single year, and a good chunk will come to Ottawa. Potentially the foreign buyer ban being lifted. We have really low inventory. If those rates start to drop, do you think we see another 2022 or the start of 2022 where the prices just skyrocket? I don't think we'll ever see it that crazy, but we may see that. And I know people when I tout this and I talk about this on the radio and I'm like, get in now, and I'm thinking to myself, does that look like the slimy salesperson because the rates are so high? But I do believe we might be in for a perfect storm somewhere in the latter part of 2024. Rates come down, prices are going to go up. You agree with that?
So my take on that would be, and we're talking about the Ottawa real estate market here, right? Which is important because Ottawa is a special town. We have a lot of federal public servants. We have a lot of government workers. We don't have kind of the big private sector, I guess, work makeup that maybe a city like Toronto or Vancouver or some of these other sectors would have. And why I say that's important is because if we do see a recession, again, we talk about this, I think we're in a recession, you're going to see the unemployment rate start to rise, right, in some cities. So that's going to put a damper on the price recovery, although we could see interest rates coming back into maybe the fours next year towards the latter part of next year and maybe the threes the year after. Again, I don't want to talk about 2 and 1% because let's be realistic here with what we're talking about, but even in the threes, the qualifying rate at 5.25 kicks in again, which was the same when rates were 1.5 or 2%. The big thing is talking about the Ottawa real estate market because all of those government jobs, those people are not going to be laid off. They're not fearful of being out of work. It could be that there's, budget cuts at different departments, but that would just mean that, through attrition, those people would maintain their jobs and people retiring just wouldn't be replaced and all that. So I think for Ottawa, I think that we could see a decent amount of boom towards the end of next year for sure. But real estate's a long-term play. If you're buying a property right now and you're saying, I'm trying to get, 5, 6, 7, 8% towards the end of next year, you're making a mistake by doing that. I think you always have to take a 5-year horizon on your asset purchase and say, look back 5 years and say, am I happy that I bought it this time? And the answer to me, I've been doing this for 10 years. You've been doing this way longer. You're a lot older than me, no offense. But the big thing at the end of that is I've never had somebody regret buying when you talk to them 5 years later.
Yeah.
Okay. So is it possible that this recession could send temporarily, over the winter, the hard real estate months are coming up really right now, right, in the Ottawa real estate market? Is it possible price could go down another 2, 3, 4%? It's very possible, but you can't time the market. But I think long term, if you're looking at getting into the market as a first-time home buyer, if you're looking at stepping up into that $1 million single-family home range, I think there's a huge opportunity there right now because, again, you're going to get a great price at that home, much lower than you got 2022, and likely much lower than that home will be worth 5 years from now. I don't see too many people that are going to buy the big single-family home that in 5 years from now are going to be unhappy about that. So the recession in Ottawa, I think, and we've seen the numbers over the years, you and I have talked about the recession numbers and look back in 08 and all of that, and the numbers were still positive in Ottawa, despite on the home price level. So I think that we're going to see some good growth towards the end of next year, but I think you have to look at this as a 5-year horizon. And when we say date the rate, marry the house, right? Like
that's a good term, yeah. And I'm still getting calls from people who bought in Jan, Feb, March, and April of 2022, and they're like, I'm underwater. I paid, $800 for my house, is now worth $750. And like you said, it's a long-term play. If you don't have to sell, I wouldn't be selling if you bought in those months. It's a long-term play. So before I ask you my next question, I do want to just point out the fact that you are sitting in my property, and I believe you called me old. Did I hear old or older?
Older.
Okay, older. So now let me ask you a question, because every industry has, a lower echelon, everyone has an upper echelon. Obviously, you being one of the best in the city, you're coming from a position of abundance and not scarcity. I can't tell you what I believe is happening, what you believe is happening next year. I think rates are coming down. I think we're going to have more of a robust market. Why are mortgage brokers and bankers telling people to take a 5-year fixed rate right now?
So one important fact before I kind of critique that is that in some instances, with the mortgage stress test and your general debt service and your total debt service qualifying ratios, the 5-year rates are the lower rates out there, lower than the variable, lower than the 2, the 3, the 4-year fixed rates. Some people that want to get into the market that need a home, unfortunately, you have to use the 5-year to qualify them. That's not always the case, but naturally being very hard to qualify. To be fair, some people need the 5-year fixed rate to qualify, right? Period. Otherwise, they're not qualifying. Generally speaking, though, like with knowing that interest rates are going to be probably quite a bit lower in 12 to 18, 24 months, because people always tell me, like, Carolyn Rogers came out yesterday and said people need to get used to higher rates for longer. She didn't say like this high, right, forever, because we know, looking at the economy, looking at the unemployment going up, they are not going to keep rates this high in 1 or 2 years from now, because we will be in the worst recession we've probably ever seen, right? What she meant is higher. And your definition of higher is not 1 or 2%. It's probably in that 3% range, maybe low 4s, but we're going to get back there, which is still significantly better than 6.5%, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to get back there. You have to take this with a grain of salt. And of course, the Bank of Canada is going to be hawkish with their stance. Jerome Powell in the United States at the Federal Reserve is going to be hawkish because they made a mistake last, January and all that, kind of being tepid about it. It's like, well, we might be done. And then what we saw is a flurry of activity and people start spending, because if people know there's an end in sight, they're going to be like, well, I'm going to spend the money. Eventually rates are going to come down. That doesn't help their fight on inflation. And the number one thing is to get inflation back to 2%. So they have to have the rhetoric to say, strong arm, we're going to keep rates as high as we need to be. They're going to be higher for longer, because they don't want people to go out and start spending a bunch of money thinking everything's done, right? People right now getting a mortgage need to look short term, because they're going to want to renegotiate that rate once the rates come down. Like, there's a big difference between 4.5% and 6.5% on a 3-year fixed rate with a 30-year amortization. It's a huge amount of money going towards interest versus principal. But again, if you take these short terms, you'll have the ability in the next couple of years, once those rates are lower, to renegotiate. And then at that point, it's very believable. And this is all, it's not your opinion, my opinion, like, this is data, right?
Yeah.
This is all data driven. Builders aren't building right now. Immigration's going up. All the politicians are talking about a housing crisis because they know that tsunami's coming. If you can get into the market right now and qualify, which is a hard thing, but if you can get in, qualify, buy the house, go short term on the mortgage rate, I think you're going to be in an amazing position in 1 to 2 years from now.
So would you take a short term or would you take a variable? Because a variable, you can jump in anytime and lock that in anytime, where if you take a 2-3, like you said, they're going to be higher than the 5-year fix, but you're stuck for those 2 or 3 years.
Exactly. So it depends on your risk tolerance, right? And how much free flow, cash flow that you have with your household income and expenses and all that. We've seen a huge uptick in the adjustable rate mortgages and the variable rate mortgages as of late, right? People that, after all their expenses are paid and the bills are paid and groceries, which costs an arm and a leg, everything's paid. If they have another $2,000, $2,500 left over, their savers and this and that, they're going to gravitate towards taking the variable or the adjustable rate in lieu of taking a 2 or 3 year fixed rate, because they're aware that when the rates come down with that type of product, obviously you will enjoy the savings right away if the Bank of Canada cuts rates, but usually what precedes that is the bond yields start to come down. And when the bond yields start to come down, the fixed rates come down before the Bank of Canada does anything. So if the fixed rates come down into the 4s, somebody might say, okay, well, that's enough for me to then turn around and lock that into a fixed rate, which you can do with your existing lender for no penalty at any point in time. So if those fixed rates come down a lot in 1 to 2 years and you say, okay, this has been good for me, it got me to where I need to be, I'm going to lock in. Or you could actually even pay 3 months simple interest and break that mortgage and refinance or switch or shop around, which again is a much more palatable penalty than the fixed rate interest rate differential penalties, especially the interest rate differential penalties that we see from the major 6 banks.
So over the last, well, let's say since the start of COVID, usually I can predict almost any real estate market. I can tell you what's going to happen in January, what's going to happen in June, and what's going to happen in every other month. I can tell you. If anyone tells you that they saw what was going to go on in the real estate market over the last 2-3 years, booming the way it did, they're entirely wrong. No one can predict that, just like it's very hard to predict what's going forward. Now let's look at the mortgage rates. Nobody would have predicted. In fact, Tiff Macklin came out and said, take variable, we're keeping prime low till probably 2024. And then we saw 8 rate hikes like this that just crippled people in the variable. And by the time people came alive and realized where the rates were, they're like, oh, I can't lock in now. I got to ride the variable wave. And it just kept going higher and higher and higher. 60% of mortgages are coming due in the next 2 years. They don't lower rates. Are we in trouble?
We're definitely in trouble, and the Bank of Canada knows this, and this goes back to what Carolyn Rogers said yesterday and Jerome Powell. And again, these central bankers, they all talk, right? They all want to be on the same wavelength. They talk. Their rhetoric of the rates are going to be high for longer. Again, she didn't say high, she said higher. But again, what's the definition of higher for longer? And people need to get accustomed to that. They made mistakes in the past with their rhetoric, right? Like Tiff McClem a couple of years ago said rates are going to be low for a while. They did in the United States. Ultimately, last January, they said we could be done right now, which sent the bond yields down and inflation surging again. So they had to raise rates again last summer to combat that. They are going to err on the side of caution. I don't believe that there's any way, and we're talking, maybe it could be, up to 12 months before we start seeing rate drops like, next fall and all that. But I believe they know this. They want to have a really hawkish rhetoric because they know they need to get that inflation target back to 2% and under control, but not just back to 2%, sustainably there as quickly as possible. Because if we have 60% of mortgages renewing in 2025 and 2026, and these are the interest rates, something in the economy is going to break.
Yeah.
And they're very aware of that. There's also an election year in 2025. Right? And generally speaking, you'll see lower rates kind of going into the election because they want positive news on the economy as we're not in a recession, we're spending, things are going well again, give us another term, right? In my opinion, there is no way rates can stay in the 5 to 6% range in 1 to 2 years from now. Again, I want to be realistic, and we want to be realistic with this. The days of 2 and 1.5% are done. I don't think we'll ever see those again because central bankers now realize that was too loose, and that created this inflationary problem that we have.
Absolutely. And even going through COVID, when people were saving money on trips, eating out, like all the discretionary spending they weren't doing. And I think people got a little bit lavish and they started buying things and they thought this was going to last forever. And then all of a sudden the rates start skyrocketing and people are like, oh, I just spent 10 grand on this, 10 grand on this, 10 grand on this. I'd love to have that back. And here's where the problem is right now. When I bring up the fact that, within the next 2 years, 60% of mortgages are coming due, and what's going to happen? The reason is we're already seeing it. And I believe home ownership is a dream.
Yeah.
And I'm now watching people whose mortgages are coming up who are no longer in home ownership. They're now becoming renters. Mm-hmm. And and I know, once you become a renter, it's really hard to get back into home ownership. And that's why I think it's very, very, and this might be the only negative part we're talking about, but we're realists, and I'm seeing it, you're seeing it, and I hate to see people who are losing homes, losing home ownership. And if that doesn't change in the next 2 years when all these mortgages are coming due, you said it's going to be a big problem. It's going to be a massive problem in the Ottawa real estate, in the Canadian real estate market. It's going to be a massive problem.
And I don't think politicians can let that happen because Canadians' biggest asset is their home.
Yeah.
Part of this spending onslaught that we saw that threw supply and demand out of whack and created inflation was during COVID, these ultra low rates, a lot of savings, but also this newfound equity, right, in their homes, where we had people refinancing to borrow, to buy toys, to take trips, to buy the cottage and this and that. And I guess people thought like, hey, this is going to last forever, right? Like my house price is going to keep coming up. I can keep borrowing against it, I can keep spending. But in reality, that's not real estate. And that's not the financial cycle, right? In the financial cycle always starts over when there's a recession, right? And then asset values drop, and then temporarily, and then interest rates drop to stimulate business spending and growth again, and then eventually that picks back up. If you watch the stock market, it's like clockwork how it's been over the last 30 years, right? But ultimately, the Dow Jones, the TSX, and all that are up. Housing prices are up, right? And this goes back to the long-term play on real estate, right? So it is a problem. Housing is a major political issue right now. They cannot afford, and I'm talking not just Ottawa, but Canada-wide, they cannot afford for housing prices and asset values to go down, in my opinion, another 15 to 20%. It will be absolute carnage if that happens.
Yeah.
And a problem that they might not be able to fix. So I think that they're very conscious of that. They want to over tighten, be over aggressive. In my opinion, the Bank of Canada has over tightened, but I would rather them over tighten temporarily to get inflation back to 2%, to get ahead of it before all of these mortgage renewals come up, right? So that the bulk of the people are not severely affected by this. But it remains to be seen what happens. But I think at the end of the day, the big thing that you and I kind of talk about, and we talk about this all the time, is where's the opportunity? You know, Warren Buffett is holding a crazy amount of cash right now. Well, why is he holding cash? Because he knows in the stock market he's going to have some buying opportunities come up. He's going to have some good deals. There are great deals right now in the Ottawa real estate market. Unfortunately, and this is sad, but there's people that have to sell their house.
Yeah.
And when somebody has to sell their house, that's an opportunity, unfortunately, for somebody else to pick up that house at a great value and grow equity and improve their financial situation and all that. So as sad as it is, when there's a tough time in the market, there's also a ton of opportunity, right? So I think that you need to be prepared for those opportunities. I think that you need to be vigilant. You need to have an excellent realtor from your team that's on the ball, knows the market, knows the areas, know where it's time to push. And you need to have an excellent mortgage broker on your side that can plan your financial situation. Saying, well, what's your lowest rate? I'm like, we all know it's a 5-year fixed rate. I can give you a 5-year fixed rate, but I'm sure as hell positive that in 12 to 24 months, you're really not going to be happy with that ultra low 5-year fixed rate we got you. So let's put a plan in place. Let's understand your risk tolerance. Let's understand your goals on the real estate side of where you want to live. Is this, are you going from the townhouse to the forever home? And there's an opportunity there, or are you trying to get into the market? Put a plan in place, because I think that there's a really good window of opportunity right now, despite all the negative press around this.
Well, we talked about this before even starting. You look at a townhome in suburbia, 700, 750, 800, going through the craziness of early 2022. Yes, rates were, 1, 2, 3%, much lower. That same townhome I'm seeing advertised right now for $599, $589. Yeah, rates are, 5, 6, 7%. There's still that opportunity, because that $599 townhome, eventually those rates are coming down, and then you're getting that property for a steal. So that's why I believe right now, and I think you'll echo this, right now is a great time to buy if you can stomach rates.
I agree, and to point out that $599 townhome that would have sold for $700 before, that townhome eventually is going to get back to $700, right? People that bought at that time are just going to have to be patient. Nobody foresaw them raising interest rates this high. I mean, I think everyone probably saw a bit of a leveling off with home prices really at that point, because things were getting unsustainable. But I'm confident. I know it might take a few years, it might take 5 years, but those prices are going to get back to that level because of the amount of immigration that we have. And also because the fact that builders aren't building right now. A builder would much rather wait and say, okay, I'm not going to roll out anything right now, because if I can sell these units for if I could sell 100 units at $35,000 more, $40,000, $50,000 more, I'm just going to wait. I'm going to sit and wait. I'm going to wait 12 months. I'll wait 18 months. I'll wait whatever it takes, because that's much better margins for them. And generally speaking, if there's a recession, tradespeople, materials, and all that, the prices come down. So their margins are going to be excellent.
Yeah.
They're not pushed to build right now, right? So ultimately speaking, that's going to put a squeeze, I think, on supply. And I think long term, I think that $599 townhouse is going to get back to $700. But you're totally right to bring it all the way back. There are lots of opportunities in the market right now. You just have to have a plan. You have to know the numbers. You have to be realistic about your situation for maybe the next 1 to 2 years on the payment side, knowing that that's something that we can fix. And I think that if we're right about the rates coming back to 3 to 4%, call it, which I know it will eventually happen. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Then that $599 house is going to see some really good tax-free appreciation. Because Canadians forget, your principal residence, the equity that you gain on it is tax-free. The federal government can't come and take that money back from you.
Yeah. So, on the radio, I've been spouting that 2 things can happen. One, rates stay the same. They remain stagnant, and we're going to have a flat 2024. But all signs and everything you've talked about is screaming rates are coming down and prices are going up. When we talk about election coming and all the broken promises we're going to get, immigration, so many people coming. Builders are, even though they're not building right now, it's a little easier to get shovels in the ground. They've eliminated some of the red tape, so they will start building again. once those rates start coming down, we will see, in my opinion, a small version of what we saw at the start of 2022. And I think it's going to be a perfect storm. And that's why I'm saying get in now, because it's going to happen. And I think probably one of the biggest telltale signs is what I just said. There's an election coming. There's going to be tons of broken promises and lower rates. Do you echo that? Do you agree with that?
I agree with that completely, and I think that people say, well, I get asked, well, why do you think rates are going to go down? Like, what do you know, right? Like, they went up higher than everybody thought, higher than I thought, higher than you thought. Nobody predicted that we're going to go this high, right? But why do you think rates are going to come down? That's the most important question. The reason I think they're going to come down is because I think there's going to be a pretty bad recession coming up. I think we're already in one. I think once we get the fall numbers, without all the level of immigration that we have, we'd certainly be negative growth right now. Like, there's no question about that. If you have 1 million people coming into the country and your GDP is 0.2%, well, those people coming in are buying cars, they're staying in hotels, they're moving, they're renting, they're getting groceries. Without that, we would be way negative right now. Like, we're in a bad recession already. I think that's kicked the can down the curb a little bit, so to speak. I think eventually that's unavoidable. I don't necessarily think that the central bankers and the governments are terribly afraid of a recession, because they know how to fix it. That will get inflation back to 2%, which is their biggest concern, just naturally through people not spending and unemployment going up. And then rates will have to come down to stimulate business growth, to stimulate spending, to get businesses to hire people, get jobs back, to get people spending, to get people consuming. Because in this country, we're a consumption economy. The US is a consumption economy. And in order to have a consumption economy, you need people to have jobs, right? And if the unemployment goes up, and it's not just unemployment going up, it's people being afraid of maybe losing their job or maybe being cut. And we've seen banks cut recently. We've seen a lot of different sectors lay off jobs. Canadian Tire yesterday mentioned that they were laying off thousands of people across the country. If people are worried, they're not going to spend, they're not going to consume, and we're going to have a recession. So I think the important question is, why do you think rates will be lower? And it's important for people to understand why we think that, why the data says that. And like you said, right, to bring this back around, I think when the rates are lower, you're going to have so many people that are like, I'm paying this much in rent, and now if the rates come down, my payment's more affordable, the prices have come down a lot, I'm going to get out of the rental market, I'm going to take advantage, and that's probably going to drive prices back up. We're probably going to have a little bit of a bubble up there like we had last spring.
Well, when we talk about recession, obviously recession's horrible. I mean, it's horrible on a lot of people, a lot of job losses, all this stuff. Two industries, though, that usually a recession is not hard on is the mortgage industry and the real estate industry. We've seen over the last 5 recessions, we've seen the real estate market do this.
And and public servants in Ottawa. We talk about the Ottawa market, right? Being a federal government town. Like, the recession does not hurt Ottawa the way it hurts major urban private sector areas, right? So I think that we're very insular in Ottawa, and that's why I think for Ottawa specifically, you still look at the average price of a home in Ottawa, despite our average income per family being slightly higher than Toronto, and the prices there are still way higher.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling, right? So can we get back to where we were? I think we can. It might take some time, but ultimately that's the opportunity in this market right now.
And you know what, Adam, I'm glad we did this, because it's there's so much negativity out there, and I hear it from mortgage brokers, I hear it from real estate agents. The world's ending, everything's going to crap, and it's not. I mean, there's lots of positives that we've just touched on, lots of positives in the real estate industry, what's going on in the mortgage industry. Anything else you want to add? I mean, besides you going on about me being just a much better looking, like much more jacked human being, is there anything besides that you'd like to add?
Well, I'd like to add a lot besides that, but I'll try to keep it brief here. I think that in this market, there's a lot of opportunity. Have a plan. The interest rates, there's no good interest rates out there right now, right? Like, I sugarcoat this when we talk to a client about wanting to get pre-approved to either move or port their mortgage or a first-time home buyer. I don't sugarcoat it. The interest rates are bad, but guess why that's good news for you? Because there's opportunity to go out and find that property that you love, either be a first home property or maybe a forever home, and get a much better price on that home than when you would have gotten 24, even 36 months ago, right? So you're it's a buyer's market right now in Ottawa, right? Like, the buyers have power ultimately. And I think if people say, well, if I'll sell for less, like, that's not necessarily good for me on one side, but If you're selling for less and you're buying for less, then generally speaking, that's a bit of a wash. As long as you're selling and buying in the same market, you're not really going to get hurt from that, right? So have a plan. There's definitely an opportunity. Make sense of it. Do your own research. Advocate. Look up the data. I think that's it's funny. A lot of people go to buy a house. They don't understand anything about finance. They don't understand anything about the economy. So when we like to sit down with our clients, a big thing is we want to educate them on what's happening. Give them information. Give them data. Give them articles so that they can best educate themselves and know how to plan and know what to expect. And I think if people have a plan and they understand what's happening out there, they're very comfortable getting into this market right now, knowing that that crappy interest rate that we told them about, that's only temporary.
And listen, the one thing I talk about is like a complete full service realtor too, is pretty much a poor man's mortgage broker. We have to know an overview of really what's going on with the market, what people's products should be, work alongside you guys in order to make this a seamless process. And I think too many people don't educate themselves on what's happening in the market. So thank you so much for this, Adam. Adam from Referral Mortgages, how can we get a hold of you if people want more advice on how to get in and out of the market?
So you can reach me directly on my cell phone, 613-864-9577, or adam@referralmortgages.com, or you can visit our website at referralmortgages.com. Be happy to have a consultation or answer any questions you might have.
Thanks for this, Adam. Very informative. I hope people enjoyed it, and thanks for helping out.
I appreciate you having me, Paul. Thank you so much.